Have you ever found yourself staring at your to-do list, completely aware of what needs to be done, yet feeling utterly paralyzed, as though some invisible force has quietly wrapped itself around your motivation, draining you of the will to begin? And after hours of trying to snap out of it, all you're left with is guilt, frustration, and that quiet, painful whisper in the back of your mind. Maybe I'm just lazy. But what if I told you that what you're calling laziness might actually be something else entirely? Something softer, deeper, and far more human. Let me tell you a story that might just shift the way you see yourself. There was a boy named Luke, 15 years old, quiet, always tired, and forever a few steps behind everyone else. He wasn't failing outright, but his notebooks were mostly half-finished, his assignments often late, and his energy seemed to vanish before the day even began. His teachers saw an underachiever. His classmates dismissed him as someone who didn't care, and even his parents, once gentle and understanding, had begun speaking to him with a sharpness that stung more than he let on. The word lazy became a label, a quiet verdict that followed him everywhere. But the truth was, Luke didn't feel lazy. He felt stuck, weighed down by something heavy and invisible, like he was walking through water while everyone else moved freely through air. And the more people pushed him to try harder, the more he pulled away. Not because he didn't want to succeed, but because he didn't know why he couldn't even begin. Everything shifted the day a new teacher arrived, Mr. Theo. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice, yet somehow managed to command a room through presence alone. On the first day of class, instead of diving into textbooks or outlines, he simply asked the students a single question. What's something about you no one sees? There was an awkward silence, a few scattered chuckles, and the usual shrugs from kids too young or too afraid to answer something so raw. But Luke didn't laugh or look away. He froze, not in discomfort, but because the question stirred something in him. It felt like someone had quietly opened a locked door inside his chest, one he didn't even realize he'd kept shut. Mr. Theo said nothing more in that moment, but after class he gently stopped Luke at the door and, without judgment, simply said, "You look like someone who's carrying a story they haven't told yet. My room's open if you ever want to share it." Luke didn't know why, but a few days later he showed up after school, not with a confession, but with silence. And somehow, that was enough. They didn't talk about grades or goals or fixing anything. Mr. Theo just listened, and when Luke finally found the courage to explain how he often froze when trying to start things, how even basic tasks felt enormous, and how guilty and ashamed he felt afterward, the teacher responded with something Luke would never forget. What if what you're calling laziness is actually an emotional injury, a wound that never got the chance to heal, now showing up as exhaustion, avoidance, and fog? Luke didn't respond at first, but in that moment something inside him softened, not because he suddenly felt better, but because for the first time, what he felt had a name that wasn't an insult. That night he lay awake, not in anxiety or dread, but in thought, remembering everything he had buried. His mother's long illness, the quiet tension that grew at home, the pressure to stay composed, the moment in 7th grade when he broke down in class and someone mocked him, and how, from that day on, he vowed never to let himself feel anything publicly again. He wasn't lazy, he was grieving. He was protecting himself in the only way he knew how, by shutting down. In the weeks that followed, Luke didn't become a different person overnight. He still had days where he struggled to get out of bed, and others where he blankly stared at assignments for hours. But there were also small changes, almost invisible at first. He reorganized his desk, not because he had to, but because the clutter finally felt like too much. He completed a small homework task without overthinking it, and felt proud, even if no one noticed. He picked up his old sketchbook and drew a tree, with no leaves and roots that reached far beneath the page. It wasn't about becoming productive. It was about becoming honest. And one day, when a classmate joked, "Still lazy, huh?" Luke looked up, not with anger but with calm understanding, and said, "No, I'm healing." Maybe you felt what Luke felt. Maybe you still do. Maybe there's a version of you, younger, quieter, who never got to speak up, who still hides behind the word lazy because no one ever taught you how to call it what it really is. Unprocessed pain, unspoken weight, or unresolved grief. And maybe, just maybe, you don't need more pressure, more shame, or another self-help checklist. Maybe what you need is permission to pause, to feel, and to heal. Because you are not lazy. You are carrying something that once kept you safe, but now, gently, it's time to let it go.